You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
Hey, what's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, and excited to be coming at you. Unfortunately, not in person. We'll be there later in the week, Jamal and I, but happy to be with you remotely, talking all things Rams on this beautiful Los Angeles evening. We're finally getting a little cooler weather in LA. It's supposed to heat up again next week, but we're seeing a little 80s temperature, at least up by me in Pasadena. I'm sure down by you, Jamal, it's a little cooler, but excited to talk Rams. They just dropped the first unofficial depth chart. Everyone loses their mind every time the depth chart comes out. Obviously, it's fluid. It's going to change a lot over the next 2 weeks, but today was the final training camp day for the Rams, at least in Irvine, as they go back to their home up in Thousand Oaks at beautiful Cal Lutheran, where they'll kind of finish their training camp-esque, but no fans will be there. So we got a lot to get into and excited to get into all of it with my good pal, the Madman. What's up, brother? How we doing? Happy day to you.
Doing well, Rye. Always excited to jump in with you and talk about all the great teams, and to start with the beloved Ramley. And I'm excited to get into this depth chart, Ryan. I think there's some interesting nuance there and a lot we can dissect.
Yeah, real excited. But first, let's do the sponsor first. Show is always brought to you by BetOnline, our good friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Plenty of stuff going on. You got MLB, golf happening, but obviously the talk of the town is football, as kickoff is just a couple weeks away. Preseason action this week. Or we already had the Hall of Fame game. Shout out DTR and Demetric Felton for lighting up out in Cleveland. But you got Rams and Chargers kicking off here soon, but plenty of stuff to bet on for football in the future. So betonline.ag, promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. Jamal, though, before we get into Rams talk, you were at the Rams house on SoFi over the weekend. You're repping the hat. I love the simplicity you went with. Little T-Sizzle action out at SoFi, sweeping the world, this era tour. You were there firsthand with the beautiful wife. Tell me, because we haven't talked in person yet, how was it? How phenomenal?
Oh, man, blessed to be at the Taylor Swift concert last Friday night. And Ryan, I'll tell you, it was electric. I've never heard SoFi that loud in my life. And Taylor Swift has almost sort of ruined football for me at SoFi, because now I know how loud it can be. And so if any football game doesn't match that level of noise, it feels like a bit of a letdown. But I've never quite seen a performer like Taylor Swift, and just the loyalty of the fan base. She walks out and everybody is screaming. She takes one step to the right, they go crazy. She makes a wink, they go crazy. She turns her head, they go crazy. She curls her lips, they go crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable. And it was 3.5 hours, Ryan, and every fan was screaming at the top of their lungs, singing along with the songs for 3.5 hours, 44 Incredible. Songs, 3.5 hours. She didn't take more than a 45-second break, 3.5 hours consecutively. It was one of the most remarkable sort of athletic feats I've ever really seen, to be honest with you. And I sort of walked away. Obviously, you get immersed in it. There were some amazing kind of LED lights with the stage and special effects. At one point, she sort of jumped into the stage, if you will, like she was going to swim, because the LED lights were water. And so she sort of jumped in, and there was like a foam thing underneath that you couldn't quite see. So it looked like she just sort of dove into the stage, which was really cool. But I sort of walked away that night saying, this almost felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I don't say that, lightly, because arguably she is the world's greatest performer and entertainer in terms of popularity, in terms of name. Mm-hmm. You get to watch the world's greatest performer at her absolute peak in the greatest stadium in the country. And, the perfect convergence of those factors makes this a very unique experience. I was thinking 5 years ago, Taylor Swift doesn't have the content to do 44 songs, doesn't have the content to do an Eras tour, 8 different albums, and, go 3.5 hours. 5 years from now, she might not have the energy to do 3.5 hours straight. And so you have the world's greatest performer at her absolute peak in SoFi. it was definitely a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I actually really enjoyed watching my wife, who is Taylor Swift to her is like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan to me, and so I got to see her at SoFi in her element be kind of this insane fan when all these years she's sort of seen me as an insane fan and so passionate in sort of a stadium setting. So for all those reasons, it was a very special night.
I love hearing that, because it would have been like the opposite with me and my wife. Like, I would have been the super fan, like singing every song word for word. And she would have been the one like, oh, this is cool. But like, what the hell is my husband doing over here? Just like geeking out. Like, I love Taylor Swift. I'm not shy about it. So when you told me you were going, I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You told me like, you sent me a picture as you were there. I'm like, you didn't tell, I was with you yesterday, the day before, and you didn't tell me you're going the next day to Taylor Swift. So, incredible. One story, and then we'll get into Rams talk. When I was in high school, so this is literally Taylor Swift came out with her, I think, first album. I'm always fuzzy on the exact dates, but I was in high school from 04 to 08, graduated in 08. And I think she came out with her first album around that time, maybe her second, I don't know. People can comment and get upset if they want. But she did a contest and about like she would be a student, like I don't know if it was a date because we were in high school, but basically would be a friend to a high school student and go to all their classes in high school. And I remember it wasn't really a rival high school. I went to Mountain Vista High School in Colorado, but we played them in football. And one of my buddies from middle school went there. It's called Regis University. It was a private Catholic university. And someone from that school won the contest. And so my buddy didn't win. My buddy was at school. He was a junior, senior, and was like, yeah, it's crazy. Like, here's Taylor Swift just walking around our halls, like sitting in class like a student. And now she was growing then, but she wasn't quite obviously where she is now. And just thinking now, the peak level of where she is, where like everything she does touches the gold. She's worth whatever, a couple $1 billion at this point. She's making $5 million per concert. She's paying her truck drivers $200,000. And to think that, 15 years ago, she was sitting in the algebra class at Regis High School in, Littleton, Colorado is pretty crazy.
No, that's an amazing story, Ryan. And I'll tell you, the sports equivalent for me with Taylor Swift, it's hard to believe, just to sort of put it into context. Sean McVay, still the youngest coach in the NFL, been around forever. Sean McVay's 2.5 years older than Taylor Swift. And, so Taylor Swift is sort of the equivalent if Bill Belichick was 33. If a 33-year-old, if Sean McVay had 6 rings right now, that would kind of be the equivalent, in the sporting world of Taylor Swift. And it's just absolutely remarkable. I will say one thing, and I don't want to get, hammered on social media here. I got the privilege to see Michael Jackson in the 90s at the Rose Bowl.
Oh, okay.
And, when he helicoptered in and all of that stuff. To me, Michael Jackson is still the greatest performer I've ever seen in my life. And I think that there are elements of like Beyonce and others where just from like a performance standpoint, there may be slightly more talent and a pure performance perspective. But I think what makes Taylor so special is the love that you feel with the audience and the fact that she's just so talented, whether it's guitar, whether it's singing, whether it's piano. And so for Taylor, it's just this whole package. And I'll be honest with you, I've never seen a career like this. This is a storybook career. I think she's going to be a songwriter forever because it's in her blood and she's obsessed with it in the best possible way. But I could see her, Ryan, in 5-6 years as a performer, kind of drop the mic and say, hey, I did 11, 12 albums. All of them were, quadruple platinum. I had a storybook career and I'm just dropping the mic now. And it would be kind of the most epic music career ever. And I think kind of not knowing her, but kind of thinking that I know her, I could see her then kind of transition into her 40s, with kind of family in mind, wanting to have kids, and because she's such a private person, and kind of really kind of turn the chapter. So to me, it's just absolutely incredible that a 33-year-old can have an Eras tour. I mean, that's remarkable in and of itself.
Yeah, insane. I mean, and she's still like a country girl transitioning into like the pop and the full culture. So I think that's where the entertainment's a little different. Like I saw Britney Spears. I won't shy away a minute. When I was a freshman in college, I saw Britney Spears, and this is before she went like off the rails or whatever.
Yeah.
Her opening act was Pussycat Dolls. This was before Pussycat Dolls were anything. And like those two back to back was like an incredible performance. But,
yeah.
Let me ask you this last thing, and I promise Rams fans we're getting into depth chart Rams talk. Was this the best concert you've been to? And if not, what's the best concert you've ever been to?
Yeah, this was the best. I mean, it's hard. This was the best, I think, end to end. I've never seen anyone go 3.5 hours. I mean, we got to SoFi at 6:30, opening acts and all, but we were kind of in and out. Got there at 6:30, left at midnight. Because of how robust her content was. I mean, it was absolutely insane. I'll always kind of remember this for my life. I mean, it's kind of this one. I got to see with my parents. I got to see the Rolling Stones Voodoo Lounge here in Pasadena. I'll always remember that. And then I'll always remember MJ. And so those are kind of the three. But for kind of artistic reasons, kind of the whole package, this was probably the greatest concert from like a whole package standpoint that I've ever seen.
That's great. That's great. For me, by far greatest concert I've seen just because it's my favorite band and not a lot of people know them, but a band called Dispatch. Love Dispatch. They're bigger on the East Coast. I've seen them here on the West Coast. I've seen them almost 15 times, Jamal. That's like, I'm a super fan of Dispatch.
That's insane.
I saw them at Red Rocks in Denver 3 nights in a row. Incredible. I saw them at Madison Square Garden. I've seen them at the Greek. I've seen them at the Troubadour. I've seen them everywhere, all over the place. Every single concert makes them so great is every single show is very different. Even when they did 3 nights back to back to back of Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Red Rocks in Colorado. And I went all 3 shows and every show was so different in just the set list and what they did for their encore and some different like guests they brought out. And I've been, like I said, almost 15 shows and everyone is so different. I think that's what makes an artist so incredible when you see them live and they can do that. So by far Dispatch number 1. I saw Rush at Red Rocks, also incredible. Similar to Taylor in the sense that they played almost 4 hours. They had no opener. Wow. They played almost 4 hours straight, just Rush. The big difference is they were in their 60s when they did it. So it was incredible watching Neil Peart on the drums and how they were able to just, the 3 of them, the Holy Triumphant jam. And if you're a big fan of I Love You Man, Rush. And then I've seen a lot of good shows. Guns N' Roses was awesome.
Oh,
that was a lot of fun. It was in Axl Rose. I don't know if you remember. This was before me and Monica were even married, so probably 7 years ago. He had gotten like a motorcycle accident, like busted his leg up. So he literally was just sitting like on a throne. So you think like, oh man, it's gonna be boring. Like he's on a throne. It was still like incredible. I mean, Slash is just unreal on the guitar. But anyway, those are probably off the top of my head. Jack Johnson was incredible. I saw Jack Johnson for different reasons. So great. But yeah. We've wasted enough time. Should we get into Rams talk, I guess?
Let's do it. Let's get into Rams talk. But let me be honest with you. There is no wasted time when you're talking about those musical legends. So, from the musical legends to the gridiron legends in the Los Angeles Rams.
Exactly. So had to talk about it because they played at the RamsHouse at SoFi. And you're rocking the Taylor Swift shirt. I wanted to show this live, but little new look for me as well.
Oh, my goodness.
Full shave. You can't tell from the lighting.
My goodness. Wow.
Can't tell from the lighting. I do have some hair, but the lighting makes me look
wow. Look at that. Oh, my goodness. I love it.
Looking at myself in the camera does not look very good, but it looks better.
No, you're right. Let me tell you something. You look, formidable. I'm going to tell you that right now. You kind of look like Edward Norton in American History X, man. It's like, do not mess with rye or die root right here. This is serious right here.
Yeah. Well, I'm much nicer, not racist, I promise. But great movie. Phenomenal movie. Great character.
Absolutely.
Not a lifestyle.
Absolutely. Right. As a Muslim American, I'm a little scared to do the rest of the segment now, so it's.
No. All right. Rams dropped their unofficial depth chart today, Jamal. And I think there was some, there's some interesting stuff to talk about here. I think me and you and I have kind of some of these, and again, this is so fluid and a lot of things are going to change, but we haven't done, I think we did kind of a roster breakdown 2-3 months ago. And I think we kind of hit the nail on the head of how some of these can break down. I don't know how we want to do this, but I think I'll just say, well, let's just start offense and talk there. Some of the notable ones on here is, Tutu Atwell listed as wide receiver 3, ahead of Skowronek, ahead of some of the other receivers, ahead of Demarcus Robinson. ahead of Puka Nacua, who obviously is having a great camp and I think will definitely be utilized, and he's rated right behind Tutu Atwell. So I think that was an interesting. But let's just start there before we just dive right into it. So your thoughts on this Tutu? I mean, I think that hats off to him for the offseason he's had if he's currently listed as wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things, Ryan. I think it's the offseason that he's had in terms of preparation and seriousness and the urgency. I think it's two is his skill set comparable to Kupp and Jefferson, and those guys being a little bit more kind of possession oriented. Obviously, Jefferson's got some burst too, but you sort of complement that with a true just vertical, go route home run threat. So I think you need that sort of variety. And then third, I think it comes into play of the experience. And also I think the Rams, from a McVay, from a management perspective, of saying, okay, it's now or never. We're going to set you up for success here. This is wide receiver 3. That's where you are on the depth chart. You're going to get the reps. You're going to get, the usage. You're going to get the flow of the game. Now we want to see the outcomes. If the outcomes don't happen here, I think there's a very credible now amount of data to say, okay, it's time to move on. So I think he's prepared. I think he's experienced. I think he has the skill set that's complementary to the first two guys. And also it's kind of a now or never urgency. I think all of those things, are kind of putting him at wide receiver 3 out of the gate here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's exciting to see, obviously we need to see it in a game time situation. And I would assume he'll get reps in preseason. I mean, if he's technically wide receiver 3, maybe McVay won't. We know he never plays any starters in preseason, but I feel like if there's a year for him to buck that trend, this is the year because of what this roster is and how young it is. And Tutu's a guy that still needs to prove himself so much, but it's definitely exciting to see. There's clearly been some growth because I think last year, going into year 2, Skinny T and I were both at OTAs and minicamp and at training camp. And there just was not that like jump from year 1 to year 2 yet. Like you could see it just was not there yet. Part of that was obviously the mess with Stafford. He wasn't throwing in camp anyway, so there wasn't chemistry there. Obviously, because he was getting reps with, second and third team quarterbacks. Part of that was just everything that happened with the 2022 Rams. So I don't want to put it all on him, but I think the fact that there's been a clear improvement now in year 3 is extremely exciting. And if we talk about all the time, I'm not saying you and I particularly, but just in general, I know I do, when looking at rookie head coaches, if year 3 is the year that we kind of see what they're made of, then I think it's absolutely fair for like a young, undersized receiver to give him till year 3 to show what he's made of. And lot to still prove, but Jamal, it's exciting that he's currently wide receiver 3. So I think he's in a good spot. Happy to see it.
No question, right? Really excited for him.
Before I move on, surprise you at all that he beat out Skowronek for that wide receiver 3, or is almost Skowronek's versatility almost hurting him in a way?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think that Skowronek's versatility is hurting him a little bit, and I think that this offense needs some verticality. I think if you have Skowronek, when you kind of go 1, 2, 3, obviously Kupp is Kupp, and Jefferson can be a very successful wide receiver number 2, but you don't really fear that trio if it is Skowronek in terms of getting beat behind you, right? And so there's opportunities to jump routes. There's opportunities to play more press coverage. There's sort of opportunities to crowd the box. And so, so much of the McVay offense is predicated on an NBA principle, which is pace and space. And so, you need Tutu Atwell there to kind of generate some space to be able to operate and create the matchups that you want. And I think Skowronek is going to play a vital role to this offense this year. But I think stacking up all of these guys together in one sort of formation becomes a little bit limiting offensively.
Yeah, I love Benny Sko, and I love his improvement from year 1 to year 2. Year 1 was kind of thrust into situations and had some drops issues. Year 2 kind of became the leader of the receiver room because of injuries and played really well. And they obviously used him in tight end formation. They used him as a fullback. But he's still, to me, a guy this year that unfortunately, and I know a lot of fans and a lot of other podcasts do not agree, but to me, he's kind of a prime cut candidate just because of everything you just said. They have a lot of tight ends on the roster. They don't need a versatile receiver that can play tight end. They have 7 right now on the roster.
Yeah.
I think only 3 are going to make it, maybe 4 max. They're moving more into the traditional McVay kind of run zone scheme, and they have a Puka Nacua who they drafted who can really be that kind of jet sweep guy as a receiver. They obviously don't want to use Cooper Kupp and risk injury, so Puka Nacua can do that, did that at BYU, has shown in training camp they can utilize him that way. So it's almost like, unfortunately, it's like you see it a lot in life, right? That jack of all trades can sometimes you work yourself out of a job because you're not like a master of none. And I don't want to see it because I love him, but I just think when you look at, if you have Kupp, Van Jefferson, and Tutu, and then I really think Demarcus Robinson adds a great element to this offense. So I think he's making it. That's 4. Puka Nacua is making it. I think he's already having a really nice camp. They drafted him. That's 5. So then your 6th guy, you're looking at, Tyler Johnson, who they brought over, has been an exciting young guy. I think Benny Sko still has like the lead on that, but I'm just putting it out there. Don't be shocked if this is a guy that ends up not making this roster just because of the depth. Surprisingly, it's all young, but the depth they do have.
No, I completely agree, Ryan. And it's sort of shocking to say. And, there's a difference between being a hole plugger on a bad team and having the versatility versus finding your role on, a team with very sort of established positions. And unfortunately, you're right. I mean, the world is very unkind to the generalist. And Benny Sko is the ultimate generalist. And so his kind of lack of doing anything sort of exceptionally well, I think really hurts him here. And I can totally see that outcome. I think if that were to happen, I think Benny Sko is going to get picked up by the right situation for, teams that kind of need that like bigger wide receiver, tight end hybrid. I think of Tampa Bay. I think of Pittsburgh. I think of Baltimore. I think those are all really nice fits for Benny Sko. So he's going to have a market if things don't work out here, but I completely agree with you. And one other point, Ryan, it's so funny you mentioned earlier about the Tutu Atwell and is he going to play and in preseason or not. This year's Rams team, the 23 Rams kind of remind me of like the 17 Lakers. You remember the 16 or 17 Lakers when they went to Vegas over the summer and it was like Lonzo Ball and Jordan Clarkson and Kyle Kuzma and Brandon Ingram and Julius Randle. And they basically went with their starting 5 to Vegas. Mm-hmm. Like they were the only team that actually like played their actual team. They ended up winning the Vegas Summer League against, 3rd and 4th string guys on other teams. So I could see the Rams kind of be that, just given how young these guys are, out with the exception of obviously like the Kupps and the Staffords of the world. But you could be seeing kind of 1s and 2s at the end of this year playing in preseason. It's going to be kind of an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, which they've never done, but they are kind of forced to.
Yeah,
especially on defense. Which we'll get to. So, but no, I'm not saying, everyone out there, I'm not saying Benny Sko is going to be cut. That's not a hot take. I'm just saying don't be shocked if he ends up being the odd man out just because of, unfortunately, kind of what other guys fill, and he kind of can do everything but doesn't do one thing great. And that's no disrespect. I'm a jack of all trades. That's who I am. I'm not an expert at anything. I just feel like I have a versatility. So I would not make this Rams team, I guess. Next thing I thought was interesting, Jamal. And I definitely haven't been overly critical of this player. He's had kind of a rougher start to his career because he's kind of been asked to do different things in terms of the style of player he was when he was drafted, and then was kind of transitioned to be kind of what he wasn't. Then kind of asked, okay, you can go back to you. And now it's like, let's see what happens. And that's Brycen Hopkins, and currently listed as the 2nd tight end. Obviously a lot can change. I think very strongly, I would be very surprised if the Rams keep 4 tight ends. I know a lot of people think they will. I think they only keep 3. You remember they got Hunter Long in the Jalen Ramsey trade, and they just drafted Davis Allen out of Clemson, and they have, 3 other guys. So there's a lot of optionality there. Obviously Tyler Higbee being the starter. But I think, to me, coming into training camp, Brycen Hopkins was going to be that odd man out at tight end. I thought it was going to be Higbee, Hunter Long, and Davis Allen. Mm-hmm. And now seeing Brycen Hopkins currently slated at 2, it would be surprising to see him drop drastically out to where he gets cut. So first of all, hats off to Bryson Hopkins, and based on kind of how he fits with the scheme, how he's done in the offseason. But what do you think about him sitting there at second instead of kind of being the low 4-5 guy that we've seen in the last couple of years in training camp?
Yeah, no, I was surprised myself. And, I think you wonder in this situation, is it that Hopkins has sort of made the jump? Is there something kind of structurally with the offense that McVay wants to change from last year, specifically in terms of using the tight end? Or is it that the Allens of the world, haven't maybe emerged yet in the same way that they were hoping? And the truth of the matter is it's probably a combination of all three to a certain extent. But that did surprise me as well. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how McVay uses the tight end this year. Last year between Benny Sko and Higbee, those were kind of the two primary receivers the whole year. And I think now when you're kind of looking at the wide receiver depth, is he relying more on the tight end to be more in kind of blocking sets? Is it more along the lines of really kind of showing up in the red zone? Is it, more kind of weak side, balancing of the field? And so I think Hopkins just kind of brings, I think, an athleticism that maybe those other guys 2 through 4 don't. And I think McVay is sort of valuing athleticism and versatility in the tight end position. It's kind of interesting. It's the versatility that hurts Benny Sko at wide receiver is potentially going to help Hopkins, at the tight end position. But it just shows, different positions have different needs.
Yeah, totally. And, this is a scenario, Jamal, that I could actually see playing out. And then I want to get to the offensive line and we'll go to defense. But everything I just said about Benny Sko and Hopkins, like I could see, depending how the offensive line shakes out and how many guys they want to keep. I know there's been years, where they've kept 10 offensive linemen. There's been years they've kept 7 or 8. So depending how the offensive line shakes out and what they feel confident they can bring back on the practice squad for depth pieces in terms of if injury arises, I could see very likely them keep 3 tight ends, but keep 7 receivers. And then Benny Sko is one of those 7 receivers because of that versatility, because then they have that optionality of him being receiver, tight end kind of incumbent. So that I could definitely see. But if they only keep 6 receivers, that's where I'm saying, I don't know if
that's where it gets a little
the odd
dicey,
man
for
out.
sure.
But if they want to go 7 and 3, then absolutely I think Benny Sko makes it because of that versatility.
I mean, you could argue Benny Sko is tight end number 2.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of in that regard. So it would be hard pressed to see Benny Sko get cut if, you're not kind of seeing the emergence at the tight end position. Now, you can call him whatever you want, but mentally you're basically saying, look, he's going to be someone that we're going to use in this hybrid spot. I completely agree with you. And I think, Ryan, I know we're going to go there, but this to me feels like a year where you got to go heavy on the offensive line in terms of what happened last year, Stafford's age. There's a lot of young pieces, a lot of moving parts. Guys are going to be fluid in and out of the rotation. You've always got to think about injuries. I think just that lack of experience, I think you sort of overcome it with quantity and ensure that, Stafford doesn't, have an injury the way he did last year. So I feel like you lean more in to the O-line this year.
Totally. And so let's get to that now. And, classic Sean McVay didn't give us any true breadth, if you will, in terms of who's actually going to start. Left tackle Joe Noteboom or Alaric Jackson, center Brian Allen or Coleman Shelton there as the ones. But what we can say is, Skinny T's been out there often, Jamal, out at training camp, and he's reported many times that Coleman Shelton seems to be getting the lion's share of the reps with the ones. He does it obviously in individuals and in snaps, but also in, 7-on-7, 11-on-11s. And Alaric Jackson seems to be kind of leading the charge with the ones in terms of left tackle. So it definitely is not set in stone, but based on what he's seeing, I would go Jackson at left tackle, Steve Avila, the rookie, at left guard, Coleman Shelton at center, Trayman Akram, who they've loved for years, and now kind of putting in as their starter at right guard, and then Rob Havenstein, the stalwart, at right tackle. So before we talk Logan Bruss, we'll get to that in a second, but just kind of your thoughts on that starting 5 if it were to hold up.
I like it. I really like it. I think there's sort of a dynamism to the line. I think there's sort of a combination, with Havenstein giving you the experience and that anchor, and then you've got youth. I think you've got athleticism. I think you've got versatility. I think you have guys who have different skill sets. Some of them are really good with kind of hand fighting and kind of their hand techniques. Others are really good in terms of their base and not, get beat quickly, if you will. So I really like where this is going. I'm glad that there is a sense of blank sheeting this. Noteboom obviously has been around the team for a number of years now, up and down. It would have been very easy for McVay to say, hey, given just how many unknowns there are on this team, how many young guys there are on this team, let me at least sort of fill in some familiar spots and then go from there in terms of filling out my roster. And clearly he hasn't done that. This is sort of a blank sheet all the way through, just about. And so when you look at this, I think there's going to be a fresh offensive line here. I think they're athletic. I think that they have the ability to not just hold a pocket, but I think they can move the pocket a little bit. And so I think you're going to kind of see, given this construction of the O-line, given where he's sort of leaning with the receivers, given where he's going with the tight ends, this year feels to me a lot like his first year with the Rams, Ryan. I think it's going to be a lot like that first Goff year. It's going to be some quick throws, rolling him out, a lot of eye manipulation, a lot of formation manipulation. I think he's going to really rely on, getting in and out of huddles quickly. I think it's going to be sort of on the line, kind of hurry up and then slowing the pace down. I think he's going to really try and stress the defense, both kind of vertically as well as horizontally. And I think that requires multiple different pieces, a lot of flexibility, almost kind of a line change approach like in hockey, which is kind of how it was in that first Goff year. And that's how he's going to sort of come up with the big play. And then once the defense kind of gets stressed with just so many different combinations, at some point there's going to be a bust, and that's when you get the big play. At some point there's going to be a missed gap assignment, and that's where you get the explosiveness. But you're not trying to necessarily be explosive the way like the Chiefs try to be or the Bills try to be for the home run play. You're actually going to be really calculated to kind of consistently get 6, 8, 9, 11 yards. And then given all the stress, you're going to rely on the defense collapsing to open up the plays. That's kind of where it feels like this offense is going to go this year.
Yeah, it's a great point because it felt like, and this is not a bad thing, obviously it worked, the Rams won the Super Bowl, but it felt like in 21, McVay's play calling got away from his kind of chess strategy, and they were just more talented than everyone. That offense was just better than everyone. When you had that receiving core, you had that running scheme, you had that offensive line that stayed healthy, you had Matthew Stafford, who was still newly off the trade, was excited to be in LA. It was a fresh new face. They want to just show off his arm talent, and they just overpowered everyone because they were just better than everyone. Rightfully so. They won the Super Bowl. And I'm not saying McVay called bad games, but I think he got away from what he did in 17 and 18 of just this chess master and this, whether it was 11 personnel, 12 personnel, different jet sweep formations, different thing of manipulating the defense. And it's kind of just hey, we're just going to go out and sling it because we have the talent to do it. And so I think now this year, like you're saying, it's it's going to get back to McVay being his core. Being the
I think it's such a great point, Ryan. I think he deferred a little bit too much to the arrival of Stafford and said, hey, I got to be a little bit more quote unquote traditional in terms of how I kind of line up this offense with Stafford's skill set. And obviously it worked, but where you saw kind of flashes, where you saw moments, were kind of some of those moments of panic, even in the Super Bowl year, right? I mean, there was kind of that losing streak in the middle. There were those games with the Niners where, you sort of question, what's he really doing in terms of, kind of the chess match with Shanahan. And I think it was because of a lack of reps that year of really kind of having a lot of chess games in season. He was very traditional and kind of relied on, hey, at the key positions, I'm better. So when you're better, what you're trying to do is you're just trying to avoid the mistake. You're trying to avoid the turnover, the penalty. You don't want to sort of balance and level the game through your mistake. You're like, hey, as long as I can kind of stay at a B+, A- level, it's going to be really hard for the other guy because I got Cooper Kupp and I got Aaron Donald and, I got a big arm quarterback in Stafford. Now he's got to go back and say, listen, hey, I don't know if I have an advantage at any position, frankly. I mean, to be very honest, we don't know where Kupp's health is. We don't know how much Stafford has in the tank. We don't know how much Donald has in the tank. We don't. And so there may not be an advantage anywhere. And so that's almost freeing him to sort of go back to his roots. And I think that's why you and I are so excited about this year, that it feels fresh. It doesn't have the household names. It doesn't have the all pros. It doesn't have the decorated first round draft picks that, Rams teams in the past or other teams in the league have. But what they do have is they got a bunch of young, hungry, new faces with a coach who's kind of going back to his roots. And I think it's just going to be really fresh and exciting. And I think they're going to be in just about every game. And I think they're going to be threatening to sort of steal a weak division.
Absolutely. And I mean, you look at last thing, and then we'll get to running backs and then defense. I mean, you look at that Rams 2017 roster, right? When McVay became head coach, and this was a 4-win team, obviously, when they fired Jeff Fisher and then brought in McVay. And they did, credit less need. They overhauled the offense and added a lot of different pieces and brought in, different receivers that kind of fit what McVay wanted to do. But before the year started, remember, these were a lot of, talent pieces outside of Todd Gurley. They were kind of castaways that didn't necessarily have success at their other stops. Sammy Watkins obviously was a 4th overall pick. Didn't have a lot of success as his first stop. They bring in, Robert Woods, and I think it was year 2. Was it year 1 or year 2 of McVay? But they brought him in early on. Didn't have a lot of success in Buffalo. Yeah. McVay kind of not only revived these players' careers, but create an offense with them that fit their skill sets. And then everyone was like, oh, I mean, everyone obviously knew McVay was a genius, but everyone was like, oh, well, yeah, look at the talent though that they're playing with. It's like, well, he created that in a sense. So we could be seeing Jamal, I'm not guaranteeing this is going to happen, but maybe we'll see this offense kind of explode, because these are names that a lot of people aren't talking about outside of Cooper Kupp. And maybe because of the revolution that is McVay, because of the excitement that he has with this game again, that we'll see kind of a blow up of a DeMarcus Robinson, who has been kind of a subpar receiver for his 7 years in the NFL. We'll see a kind of a blow up of a Van Jefferson finally getting to what McVay wants him to be. We'll see different things. So I just think it's super exciting.
I do too. And I'm not sure how it's going to turn out. None of us have sort of a crystal ball, but the one thing I will say, Ryan, is if it does turn out anywhere near 2017, you're going to be talking about extending McVay's career 6 to 8 years. That elixir is going to give him, we're going to forget about all this retirement talk for a really long time. And I think that's going to be the recipe. If this offense kind of struggles again this year, then I think there's a lot of credence to maybe him walking away sooner. But if they kind of go back to their 17 roots and he takes all these diamonds in the rough and turns them into a humming offense when no one expected it, there's nothing like that. It doesn't matter what ends up happening. If they overachieve, that is going to give him the juice to keep going. Because you ask any coach, what they define as a successful season isn't necessarily winning a championship. It is, did I get the most out of my roster? If I overachieved with my roster, then that was a successful season, regardless of what that ends up meaning from a final wins and losses standpoint, or where you end up going in the playoffs or what have you. And so if he can overachieve with this roster, he's going to get so much juice from that and say, hey, I can do this again. And it's fun again. And I'm starting over again. And I think that will extend his career in a very meaningful way.
Yeah. It's basically what we saw in the Rams-Raider games last year, the Baker Mayfield 98-yard comeback.
Who called that? You and I were the only two people in LA that declared that one to be a victory. When everyone was, I think the Rams are coming off six losses in a row or 7 losses in a row. And we said, look, I think it's going to happen Thursday night. He's going to, throw away the playbook, go back to his instincts. And lo and behold, look what happened.
And we said Baker would play. No one else was saying Baker would play.
We're like, Baker's not going to play. They're going to go,
Baker's playing.
It'll be Walford, or they'll pick up Walford's buddy at JP Morgan, or they'll go down the street, to Bank of America, get a quarterback and, lose 38-0. And, that's the magic of McVay.
That's right. So, all right. Well, I don't think we need to talk about running backs. Cam Akers slotted as the starter. Kyron Williams, who we think is going to become the starter, at second. Ronnie Rivers third. Royce Rubin and Zach Evans, the rookie, at fourth. I don't think we really need to discuss that. Before we go to defense, quickly just want to get your thoughts. Quarterback slated at second. It says Stetson Bennett or Brett Rippon. All reports out of training camp, and Skinny T has talked about it too, is Stetson Bennett has looked very good. Just kind of your thoughts overall on Stetson, and is it real? Is it just some camp love that we see all the time, or is this a guy that has a I don't want to get too futuristic with this because it's a long time coming, but this is a guy that maybe can actually be a credible starter down the line.
No, he can't be a credible starter down the line, but I think that he is somebody who I think is an upgrade at the backup quarterback position compared to where this team was last year. And I think that given just the lack of talent, love those guys from last year, Wolford and Perkins, but it was clearly kind of limited in terms of their abilities as NFL quarterbacks. Bennett comes in with all that pedigree. He's got a big arm, and everyone forgets he's 28 years old. I mean, so this guy is, a veteran, in terms of the game of football. So I think he's kind of come in. I think he's had a tough offseason after kind of winning the national championship, got into a little bit of trouble there. Nothing major, but, now I think his head is sort of locked in, and I think he's clearly the number 2 guy. And I think he's been able to sort of lead a championship level program and had some huge moments for Georgia the last 2 years. So for all of those reasons, I think he's the number 2 quarterback. I just don't see a path here of upside where he's kind of a credible starting quarterback. There may be a mop-up duty, 1 or 2 starts because of injuries or whatnot, but if you're rolling Stetson Bennett out as your starting quarterback, you are full on in rebuild mode, and you're playing for the future. So I'm excited about him being kind of the backup, but that's all he is a backup.
Yeah, and I know you were joking. I just want to say, so we don't get thrown to smithereens in the comments. We know Stetson Bennett's 25, not 28. So just so no one freaks out at us. But no, I agree. I think I'll just say this. I think it's been very positive to see how he's looked in camp so far.
Yep.
And I think where he is right now is a backup quarterback, as you said, and I agree. He's a upgrade at backup. I think either are Brett Rippon or Stetson Bennett.
Yep.
But I think there has been some excitement in the arm talent, in the kind of gravitas that he carries himself.
He's got a huge arm, and he had a ton of swag at Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt. So that he's bringing kind of that Hollywood flavor to Hollywood, and I think people are really resonating.
Totally. So excited to see, that's what he is right now, and we'll see. We'll continue obviously talking about it and see where he goes. But as of now, he's a very upgradable backup, which is great to hear.
And Ryan, I mean, it kind of goes back to that rule I've always said is, in college, when you have an advantage at every position, you have to just destroy every record the way Burrow did. Like if you were just kind of an average quarterback with an advantage at every position, that's kind of a recipe for disaster at the next level. And so, not saying that Stetson Bennett, wasn't bad, but he wasn't Joe Burrow, he wasn't Cam Newton, he wasn't kind of an iconic college quarterback. He was good. He was serviceable. He made big plays when he needed to. He won. I mean, that's the bottom line. But when things even out and you don't have an advantage at every position, I have my doubts. And you're not going to just sort of learn that overnight at 25 years old. I was joking about the 28, but overnight, after being closer to 30 than you are at 20 with just one camp. So I think he's definitely an upgrade. Very excited about the upgraded backup quarterback. But I don't see Stetson Bennett as a future of this team from a starter perspective.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say, absolutely, we're going to be, rooting for him. Like, could it change things? Absolutely, we'll keep seeing it. But I think a good comparison, and I'm not exactly comparing quarterback to quarterback, talent for talent, but you look at a guy like AJ McCarron out of Alabama, had all the talent around him in Alabama, drafted in the 5th round when he was selected. Betson was 4th round. Stetson Bennett was 4th round. Betson, that's a nice nickname,
thing,
right?
If you want to bet on Stetson, Betson.
Yeah, Betson, that's a nice little Bennifer action. AJ McCarron though, drafted, spot started sometimes, looked good, and spot starts, definitely not a full-time starter in this league. Stetson Bennett, maybe no more than that, and that's okay because he was drafted in the 4th round to back up Matthew Stafford. But we will see what happens with him. All right, this has been fun. Let's get to the defense, Jamal, shall we? It's nice when we don't have a radio cutoff time. We can talk.
Absolutely.
Defensively, this is where I think this depth chart, outside of probably Aaron Donald, Ernest Jones, and Jordan Fuller, and I guess we could probably throw in Akella Weatherspoon and maybe Kobe Durant, it's like still wide open regardless.
Yep.
There's just so much flexibility, so much fluidity with it because of how young this roster is. So I'll say, and we can talk kind of briefly because I don't think there's a ton to talk on, but on the defensive line, currently at defensive end, you got Marcus Copeland or Ernest Brown. Good to see him kind of making strides after they drafted him a few years ago. Kupp went on the practice squad. Now is kind of making strides for a starting spot. Nose tackle, Bobby Brown III or Kobe Turner. Let's talk about this first before I go any further. I don't think we got to talk about the ends too much. But we kind of said, similar to Tutu Atwell, this is kind of Bobby Brown's this is his year to prove is he what his medal is for this team. And so I'm not concerned yet, but the fact that Kobe Turner is already challenging for this nose tackle spot as a rookie, as a raw rookie that we knew was going to take some developing, that tells me a lot of excitement around Kobe Turner and his development already this early on and his athletic ability. But B, again, I don't want to say I'm concerned, but I'm watching more intently. Is Bobby Brown going to be a future Ram? Your thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point, Ryan. I am concerned. I'll say that. And, it's with Turner, you knew kind of all the kind of the physical traits are there. He was raw. You and I kind of talked about it at length in terms of when we went through the Rams draft class. With guys like that, you sort of look at it in other positions too, in other position groups. We're talking about it at receiver. We're talking about it at offensive line. You're seeing guys kind of, third, fourth on the depth chart, or, they're part of kind of a second unit. The fact that Bobby Brown is getting pushed to this extent, you really wonder here. And I think, again, it speaks to what is McVay sort of emphasizing, and how is he sort of relating it to his defense. I think this defense is going to be a lot quicker. I think they're going to be a lot lighter off the ball. I don't think this is going to be sort of a power rush per se. I think it's going to be one of those things where they're going to play kind of containment defense. And I think they're going to kind of rely on, leaner, faster guys at the line to sort of create some disruption. I don't think they're just going to sort of plow over you, obviously with the exception of Donald, and sort of go about it that way. And I think that's, to me, what's kind of the more telling element is that, yes, I'm a little bit worried about Brown. I'm concerned about Brown, but it also kind of is a signal. It's a tell of what McVay is kind of thinking, how to complement his offense with the style of defense that he's hoping that gets instituted.
Yeah. So we'll see kind of how that progresses, because it'll definitely be interesting. I know how bullish they were on him after drafting. We've talked about it a lot. I've mentioned a lot, but clearly isn't grabbing that starting job by the horns. And this is there's no year where you're going to have a better opportunity to grab the starting job, because there's not a lot of competition. At least there's not a lot of veteran competition. And so the fact that, when you look at the nose tackle position on the roster, they basically have two guys slated as nose tackle, Bobby Brown and Kobe Turner, and they have them both slated as starters. So that kind of tells you kind of how that competition is going. So hats off to Kobe Turner. Got to step it up if you're Bobby Brown. And we'll see both these guys, I would assume, a lot in preseason and see how they go up against in real live action, which that will probably, Jamal, one of the most, for me, the positions that I watch the most in those preseason games to see kind of how performance goes.
For sure.
All right, moving down. Outside backers, you got Michael Hoyt and Byron Young as your starters. Daniel Hardy comes in at second. Nick Hampton at second. You can comment. I don't think there's a lot of surprise here. This was a position, when you look, if you want to call it outside linebacker, if you want to call it edge position, where there was basically a lot of youth, a lot of inexperience.
Yep.
Could be any one game.
Yep.
In my opinion, I think when the season's ready to start, it'll be Daniel Hardy and Byron Young as your two. But Michael Hoyt, did play 3 games last year in this spot, so I guess there's a little more veteran to his.
I mean, he's a seasoned vet at this point, given the Rams. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't know if you have any other comments, but I don't think there's much
no.
more
I think I completely agree with you there, Ryan. And I think they drafted with sort of that in mind, and I think they're sticking to their draft plan. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of where separation takes place. I think all those guys kind of do things well. Some of them do kind of different things, better than others. So I'm excited to see where that plays out. And again, I think the front seven is going to be a really critical piece here of this team, because if you look at the rest of the division, at a quarterback position, the secondary is going to be young and they're going to be untested and unexperienced, but they're not exactly going against a murderer's row of quarterbacks in that division. And so to me, if you can kind of have some containment in the front seven, you're going to be in every ball game. And so that the backers here are going to play a pivotal role. So I'm really excited to see how it shakes out.
Totally. And, you talk about those backers and specifically the inside backers. Ernest Jones obviously is going to be your incumbent starter, who is kind of outside of Aaron Donald, maybe the best defensive player on this roster. And then Christian Roseboom, who I think has, he's been on this roster for a number of years. He's kind of improved year over year. And, maybe out of necessity because of lack of talent or experience, slotted in as that other starter next to Jones. We see this defense a lot, runs a lot of just single inside backer sets.
Yep.
So I think that's fine because Jones will be the main guy, especially will probably be the green dot guy, maybe one of the safeties. But I think it's cool to see, Noteboom kind of get that nod. Keep saying Noteboom, Roseboom get that nod at this juncture in time. And, there's a lot of youth behind them. So a lot of opportunity at that position outside of Jones.
No question. And, Ryan, I'll be honest with you, a lot of youth, a lot of opportunity. I think guys that are going to be sleepers, but if Ernest Jones isn't the second best player on this defense this year, I'm going to be a little worried. I think that's sort of a recipe where I think Ernest Jones in many ways is going to be kind of the barometer of this team. And I think his level of play, I anticipate having a very strong correlation to the Rams' ability to win or lose games or take games into the second half, take games into the fourth quarter. And so I'm sort of making I don't know if it's a hot take, but I actually think of Ernest Jones more. I mean, Stafford, it's obvious, and Kupp and Donald and all of those guys. But I think Ernest Jones is going to be the single greatest barometer of Rams' success this year. And so to me, if he's struggling and he's struggling to sort of get reps, I think just having that much youth on the field at the same time eventually is going to be problematic. So I'm really looking for a big year for Ernest Jones this year.
Well, and we know the Rams are in this remodel and they were shedding a lot of older, big contracts. But the fact that Bobby Wagner had signed a 5-year deal and only played one of them, and they cut ties, taking on a lot of dead cap, obviously showed how much they believe in Ernest Jones for not just this year, but for the future. Because they were tied to Bobby Jones for, 4 more seasons. Or not Bobby Jones, Bobby Wagner for 4 more seasons. So clearly they could have had him in their plans and had all the other releases and trades that could have freed up cap space. But they clearly thought Ernest Jones was not only the future of the team, but also could have been one of those things where they felt because of how they run defense, because of how Raheem Morris's system is, that they didn't need 2 similar backers on this roster because they run so many one backer sets. And so they knew Ernest Jones could kind of run the ship and do that. So I'm excited as well, Jamal, to kind of see. And I agree that he is not only the most important person on this roster, on this defensive roster. I know Aaron Donald's there, but just in terms of the future and in terms of what's going to make them tick. But he'll be a great barometer of kind of where they're at. So, all right. Lastly, we're at an hour here for Rams talk. This has been great. Let's just lump the secondary in together.
Yeah.
Kobe Durant is kind of the darling of this secondary. Everyone loves Kobe Durant. Played well last year. Is kind of going to be, especially with Jalen Ramsey gone in the face, so no surprise there. He's the starter. Robert Rochelle slated behind them. Derion Kendrick slated in the starter, even though missing a lot of training camp because of injury, but that shows how much they believe in his ability and what he's able to do. Keller Witherspoon, the third corner there, who they, added late in free agency, but obviously the true veteran at 26, 27 years old. And he's the vet, the wily vet in this group. And you look at safeties, Jordan Fuller, obviously slated right now. Rusty East, I think we all know John Johnson will eventually take that over when he's had more than a day with the uniform on. So, any surprises? To me, there's no surprises, but any surprises to you at all with these starting 5?
No surprises there. And looking at Kobe Durant to make the big jump, he played, as a feisty young player last year, showed a lot of spark. I think that if you look, we've talked a lot about kind of that jump between year 2 and year 3. But corner, I feel like, is a year 1 to year 2. Corner and quarterback are the two positions where there can be a significant jump between year 1 and year 2, just given your vantage point, relative to your particular unit there. So I'm looking for Cobie Durant to kind of blow up this year and be the undisputed best player in that secondary. And when you think about the Rams defense this year, you think Donald, Jones, Durant. Those are the first 3 names that come to mind. So I'm looking for him to kind of be that shutdown corner, to take over from Ramsey, and really sort of be able to allow the defense to kind of play strong side, weak side, and really sort of be in a situation where they feel like they can own a matchup, they can own a side of the field, and move forward there. So I'm waiting for the Cobie Durant breakout party. I don't want to see it be a sophomore slump, and so this year 1 to year 2 transition is huge, because if he can kind of take off, I think it sets the Rams up really nicely. If he slumps and, gets in his head a little bit, which we see second-year players do, particularly at the corner position, then that's going to be deeply problematic for that whole unit. So, again, another huge barometer there. I mean, in a lot of ways, Ryan, I think we sort of know, what Aaron Donald is and the institution that is Aaron Donald. And assuming he's healthy, he's going to be Aaron Donald, or maybe 85% of prime Aaron Donald, just given age. We sort of know that window. We sort of have that band of what his performance is. To me, Jones and Durant kind of make or break the season. I mean, if Jones and Durant have big years, this is a 7, 8, 9 win team that's threatening to win the division. If they both kind of lay an egg this year, now you're drifting back down to 4, 5, 6 wins. So to me, these are the two guys. I know there's a lot of conversation about what McVay is going to do on the offensive side of the ball, but if you don't have the middle linebacker anchor and you don't have that stalwart in the secondary that you can rely on, really, really hard to play the Sean McVay style of offense, which is predicated on, for as much of, versatility there is and dynamism there is, McVay is a master of time of possession and controlling the clock and knowing when to take his chances, because he knows what he's going to get out of his defense. When you don't know what you're going to get out of your defense, it's very hard to sort of comfortably call a play, set up drives over time, set up plays over time. So to me, Jones and Durant are kind of the unsung heroes here, or they're either going to be pinned with a significant turnaround season above expectations, or they're going to be kind of the first 2 names that you point to of saying, hey, this didn't work out this year. Yeah,
totally. And it's a great point, and it's going to be exciting to see how they kind of progress and improve, but also, piggybacking on that, Jamal, I'm super excited to kind of see, with Jordan Fuller and John Johnson as your starting safeties. I think the prospect of Russ East and Quentin Lake being your backup safeties is really exciting because you have, in my opinion, really talented, good depth there as backups, but also some versatility if you do need to slide those guys in nickel or whatever you do in kind of your packages. As we talk all the time on the Chargers podcast, how Brandon Staley views corners and safeties as DBs, interchangeable, right? And I think Raheem Morris maybe not quite as much, but I think he does that to an extent as well, as like viewing these guys as interchangeable and doing different things. So wouldn't be shocked if we see 3 safety sets with Lake or Russ East out there, and having Derion and Cobie Durant, or maybe having a Trey Tomlinson sub in or whatever. So I think there's obviously so much youth, so much unknown, but I think there's a lot of excitement around this secondary because of the talent. And then now you have kind of your proven guys with Fuller and John Johnson kind of, we didn't even talk about John Johnson being added back to this roster, but kind of having these proven guys on the back end that can kind of be your quarterbacks in terms of ball and seeing how things fan out, and then seeing the youth and ball hawk ability and kind of what they can do with Aubrey Pleasant's tutelage and Raheem Morris's tutelage. So just like this whole team, Jamal, I mean, a lot of unknown, but a lot of excitement overall.
A lot of excitement. And the one thing I'll say, Rise, I'm really excited to see Quentin Lake kind of stay healthy and obviously kind of get the tutelage that he needs with the likes of Johnson and others. And, because when he was at UCLA, Ryan, he was a stud, and it was just a matter of him being able to stay healthy and on the field. Lots of range, lots of length. his ability to kind of break up passes with his wingspan. He's got really good instincts on the ball. He's got great hands. And he's kind of got the power to finish plays from a tackling standpoint, but he's also got really good hands. And so there's really an opportunity for Quentin Lake to make a couple of plays over the course of this season that can really kind of change momentum in a particular ball game. And so excited to see that play out. Look, we're only going to know, we'll know a little bit more in preseason, but the discovery is going to take place week 1 onwards. And so, let's see what we have. I think the Cards are better than what the national media may think and what others think, just given the nature of kind of that line between kind of good and great in the NFL is actually kind of razor thin, and then there's sort of a big gap between kind of great and elite. But I think the Rams are wildly underrated here. It's just going to be a matter of if the lack of experience can gel quickly enough to consistently make the right plays and not shoot themselves in the foot because of the lack of that experience. I think if they can do that, this is a team that's going to quietly surprise a lot of people in this league this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me and you have been saying that since February, so excited to see it. But there you have it. First unofficial depth chart released. Preseason games coming up this weekend. Cannot wait. Rams football is back. It was a phenomenal training camp down in Irvine. Huge attendance numbers from the Ramleys. So great jobs, Rams fans. So excited about the season. Cannot wait. We'll have plenty more for you into the week. That's all the time we got. This is the LA Football Show, Rams Talk Edition. For Jamal Madney, I am Ryan Dyrud. Everyone have a blessed morning, afternoon, night, whenever you're listening. Thanks always for tuning in. Make sure to check out LAFBnetwork.com for everything Rams. We'll talk to you guys all in a few days.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.